This is the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast session number 191, NLP Business, Chunking Up and Chunking Down.
Welcome to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast with Jason Linett, your professional resource for hypnosis training and outstanding business success. Here's your host, Jason Linett.
Welcome back to the program. It's Jason Linett here. And for those of you in the United States listening to this on its launch day, happy Thanksgiving. And for everybody else, happy whatever day it happens to be for you. We're launching a bit of a mini series here on the program over the next couple of months, all about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming strategies, specifically applied to business, or as we're going to brand it here, neuro-linguistic business. It's all about applied hypnotic strategies and language patterns to become more influential in your sales, your promotions, and getting more hypnosis clients. It's going to help you to discover that the language that you probably already use in some way to help your clients can also motivate them to hire your services. You could have the greatest skills as the hypnotist. You could have the most outstanding ability to help assist a person getting from point A to point B. Yet, it's where really as we learn business strategy, you could get into the Facebook marketing. You can get into the methods of building a website. Yet if you yourself are not appropriately influential and let's call it ethically persuasive, it doesn't matter what the platform that you're using is to get out there and be seen, it's not going to be effective. As I like to say, it's not the platform, it's the strategy. So in this neuro-linguistic business series, it's all about giving you the strategies to really present your services with the authority, with the confidence, with the importance that it really has. We're at times helping people to save lives. So it's where I'd give you a bit of a backstory here, that a couple of years back, I published a phone process all around how I navigate the incoming phone consult. And it was built and presented in such a way that there were no clever closing strategies or any of that mess. And my whole position was, I only wanted the client in my office because they were ready to be there on that day, not because I learned some influential bit of patter. Well, that's what I used to believe. What I now firmly stand by is that this person is calling you for a reason. And you have a service. You have a specific set of skills that, when applied, can help them produce that outcome. Therefore, here's an upgrade. It is within your ethical responsibility to use whatever appropriate strategies are there to help them to make that decision, come into your office, and produce that change. That's where we're going with neuro-linguistic business. And this is a bit of a preview, by the way, for my live 2-day training event that's happening after the HypnoThoughts Live convention in August 2019 in Las Vegas, Nevada. You can learn more about this specific offering by heading over to worksmarthypnosis.com/NLP biz. So NLP BIZ, that's where you'll see all the details for this live interactive hands-on course. This is not being offered as an online option or a streaming option because this is again about getting the specifics, the tonality, the intention, getting that hands-on feedback mechanism so by the time you're back in your office, you are much more influential, much more ethically persuasive, and much more ready to book these premium clients. Check that out again, worksmarthypnosis.com/NLP biz. And this specific mini session is all about chunking up and chunking down. How do we make use of this meta model questioning to really dive deep into the client's potential issue and then use that as a leverage point to help them become motivated to book our services? And with that, let's jump directly in. This is session number 191, NLP Business, Chunking Up and Chunking Down. My goal is to present this information to you in such a way that you can put it to use immediately. So here's the roadmap. I'm going to give you a 4-step process to explain what I'm about to teach you. Then we're going to get into the individual specifics and moving pieces that makes this all work. And then to tie it all together, I'm going to then put together back those 4 steps. That way you've got the context of everything. That way you are ready to put this to use immediately. So here are the 4 steps, and get ready because for some of you this may be some vocabulary that you don't yet know, but don't worry, you're going to learn very quickly here. Step 1, meta model questions to chunk down into specifics. Details coming later. Step 2, strategy feedback to look for motivation and values. Step 3, chunk up to appeal to their identity and heighten the need to create the change. Step 4, present your services as the solution, feeding back this information. There you go. So let's get into the specifics here, and let's take a moment and let's build the context that here is the situation of you're on the phone with a potential client, or you're doing a live consult, or you're just meeting somebody in the area who has now discovered you're a hypnotist. And they've now made the statement, well, I'd like to become more active so I can lose weight. And that sentence right there, let's spend most of our time branching off that sentence. I'd like to become more active so I can lose weight. If we took that statement as it was, just the surface structure of what that statement meant, there's not much to it. And even worse, you could begin to mind read that statement and start to maybe assume you know what that means, which you might, but then again, you might not. Realize that becoming more active could mean all sorts of different things. And if you want my favorite example of this, it happened yesterday. Here is the first person ever who came in and said, well, I'd like to become more active again. And when we get into the actual process here, I asked him, well, when you say becoming more active, what are those things you'd like to be doing? And this dude used to be a champion fencer. Yeah, he was a fencing expert. So they're out there with the swords and the mask and the uniform that they wear. That was his exercise. When, someone like me, all I do is weightlift. The session last week with Freddie Jacquin, he was talking about martial arts. Here are people in our communities who are runners, or we've got the CrossFit folks. We've got a bunch of Tough Mudder people apparently in the hypnosis community. So if you were to assume what they meant by saying, I'd like to become more active, you might be right, but you got good odds of being wrong. So this is inside of that step 1. Let's give you the actual definitions of chunking up and chunking down. The mental model questioning is based on the fact that language is something that we as people had to invent. The structure of the mind is something that is what it is. And through science and, neurological studies, we're able to advance our understanding of the brain. Yet before we could do that, people invented language. Therefore, language is flawed by comparison to what the mind can actually do. The classic example is that the mind doesn't quite negate things, and if you want the easiest example of that, right now, to be successful with this quick training, don't think of a pink elephant. Stop it. So language invented the ability to negate and remove something, but in order to tell someone to not consider something, they first have to consider it. That aside, this is how language works. Through language, we're either generalizing, distorting, or deleting information. So, I'd like to become more active so I can lose weight. What's been deleted is, first of all, what are those active things, as well as the opposite side of that of, I'd like to lose weight. Well, why? What's in it for you to create this change? So, when we're chunking down, by chunking down, this is the process of getting more specific in someone's language. So the easiest thing here, I'd like to become more active. Well, what are those things you'd like to be doing? Or even, so I can lose weight. Well, how much weight specifically would you like to lose? So the simplest version of the chunking down question is looking for specifics. And even so far, keep it simple on yourself. Use the actual dialogue of going, specifically, what do you mean by that? So chunking down, getting into, what is included inside of that? What are those things you're going to be doing? How would you rather be eating once we branch into that topic? So by getting into this, we're breaking apart the bigger picture statement of I'd like to become more active so I could lose weight. The same way that you'll likely hear someone say, I'd like to make healthier food choices. This is where some of you might be thinking that, well, instead of doing a sales process, I'm actually doing the first step of my consultation with this person. And if you're thinking that, you're exactly right. The old statement that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should be using those in that format. So we should be listening more, because until we actually know what the person wants to achieve, hear this next phrase very carefully, we don't yet know exactly what sales strategy to use to help to present the program to help them achieve that outcome. It's client-centered business, my friends, in addition to client-centered hypnosis. So by getting into those specifics, now what am I doing here? Everything I do in terms of business comes down to the mindset of gathering assets and then leveraging them. So let's assume I'm learning from this person perhaps that they would like to get into running, or their gym has a series of workout classes that they enjoyed doing at one point and like to get back into that. Or when they say, I'd like to be eating healthier, well, what does that include? Well, what do you specifically mean by eating healthy? What are those things you'd rather be doing differently? These are your chunking down questions. So by asking these questions, you're again getting their specific roadmap, which, by the way, keep note of this stuff because this becomes the content for your actual session. So here's the client who's coming in and he's going, I've had this recently many times over. I'd like to track my macronutrients rather than just calories. I'd like to track my macros and also try to eat more in like a paleo style of eating. No processed foods and mostly whole foods. The Whole30 program is really popular these days, and you might, look into that, which is a side note. Not to give my clients a program, I've sometimes shown them the PDF shopping list of Whole30 as a little bit of a mindset adjustment to go, hey, look at this program. Not necessarily to say you should go off and do this, but isn't it interesting that here's an amazing whole shopping list of foods you can eat rather than focusing on what you shouldn't be eating? Which is a little side note. I'll put the show notes on the WorkSmart Hypnosis website. We'll link to that specific program. For what it's worth, my wife and I did that a couple of years ago, and it's not meant to be a weight loss program, but people who follow it often lose weight. How about them apples? And yes, you can eat apples on Whole30. So again, so far, we're inside of step 1. Meta model questions to chunk down into specifics. And the benefit of this is, again, this gives you the roadmap into their issue. And there's a side effect, as it's often said, to this meta model questioning, and it's the fact that very often people will start to create their own breakthroughs because they themselves are dissolving their own violations of language. They're breaking through their own distortions, deletions, and generalizations. And the side effect is that often these discoveries, these epiphanies that they're making, they start to credit back to you because you were the one asking these questions to dive deeper into their individual issue where, I'd like to exercise more. Well, what would that exercise be? I really enjoyed CrossFit. I got into that a couple of years ago. There's a CrossFit gym right near my work. I could go there and shower before heading into work. That was a great fit for my day. Well, is that the best time of day that you'd be going? Continuing to explore that statement. Well, yeah, I can go in the morning. Well, what are those things you'd have to be doing to make that easier? This is all chunking down questioning. Well, I'd have to wake up a little earlier, which means, I watch a lot of TV in the evening, maybe turning the TV off an hour earlier and just shifting my sleep schedule. Okay, well, what else would have to happen to make that easier for you? And again, now we're getting into these specific questions, which in many ways, they're starting to solve their own issue. So again, the chunking down is specifically step 1, breaking apart these surface structure statements, which here's a few more examples of this, by the way. The side effect of this, by the way, another side effect would be the fact that you're driving them to think differently about their issue than how they have so far. This is starting to get into solution-based questions rather than problem-centered focus. Isn't that where we should be spending our time? So here's the person who calls up and says, I have issues with public speaking. And rather than pull out my old trusty script for public speaking fears, instead, let me chunk down to start to get a better understanding of what this issue would be. Well, what happens when you try to speak in public? And by answering this, you start to get a little bit more of a roadmap as to what their issue actually looks, feels, and sounds like. You've actually got some meat to grab onto, even so to map it out. Is it this anxiety feeling before you present, and then you're fine when you're speaking? I hear that one all the time. Is it that you're fine leading up to the presentation, but as soon as you see the faces out in front of you, that's when this feeling appears? Or is it this rush of adrenaline that happens after you present? What's going through your mind? What are you thinking about? Again, this is all that chunking down into the specifics. Or even looking for counterexamples, perhaps, to look at a bit of a sleight of mouth approach to this. Are there times where you speak in public where this doesn't happen? And again, by asking these questions, they are driving themselves into that unconscious processing to look for the answers, crediting some of these epiphanies, discoveries back to you, which is starting to, again, build that expectation that you are a person who can help them to resolve this issue. Because you are. High five. You're doing great. So from there, that really satisfies our chunking down questions. One more here just for fun. The chunking down with the stop smoking client. How many do you smoke a day? What's the longest you've been able to stop on your own? Let's see. What was it that made you go back to it the last time that you stopped and then went back to it? Of those cigarettes, how many are you smoking because you've made the decision versus that's just the thing you always do, which is driving them to realize this really is kind of just a habit at this point. So from there, and even the person calling and saying, I'm addicted to it. Here's a person I saw a few days ago that can go weeks at a time without smoking. We're talking habit at this point. So let's now move back to the actual formula here. That's step 1, meta-model questions to chunk down into specifics. Then from there, step 2, strategy feedback to look for motivation and values. So this is a bit of a hint into the chunking up, which we're going to do more heavily in step 3. So tell me more about CrossFit. Tell me more about this Whole30 style of eating. Basically, I'm going to use that simple language pattern of tell me more about. That's going to help me to explore that thing. And in many ways, this is going to start to deliver to you some of the internal motivations, some of the drivers, some of the values, basically some of the reasons why they want to do this. So tell me more about CrossFit. Well, when I was doing it before, I really loved the mobility of my body. I loved that I was walking around and I just felt stronger. And, even if I was out amongst new people, I felt more confident in my own body. Well, now we're no longer really talking about exercise more to lose weight issue, are we? We're starting to get some hints that this is a process that's really about building greater confidence, greater self-esteem, greater self-assurance when they're actually around other people. So this is a bit of a hint towards the benefits, the whole what's in it for them. So again, in step 1, we chunked down to get into the specifics. Now in step 2, I'm going to feed back some of these specifics, some of these strategies that they've given me to learn more. So tell me more about this sort of keto style whole foods way of eating that you just mentioned. I might say if that's what they presented to me. Which again, side note here, notice that I'm not having to get into the game of, well, is it appropriate to make dietary recommendations to your clients? Again, they're telling me what they want to do. Here's the real picture to all this. Years ago, a guy came into my office for weight loss and he suddenly drops the statement, yeah, but you're just going to try to persuade me. To which I smiled and said, yes, sir, I'm going to help to persuade you to do those things you've already decided to do, but you're just not doing yet on your own. Sound good? And he goes, yeah, that's what I need. So again, we're using their map of the world. We're using their content. We're using their story back. And in step 2 here, we're feeding back that strategy. And the simplest language pattern is, tell me more about. And by doing that, that's going to start to tell you what's important to this individual. Let's take this completely out of a hypnosis context for a moment, and let's bring this into a standard sales strategy. I don't sell cars. And chances are, now that I think about it, I've only had maybe 1 or 2 people on the podcast in these 192 sessions. I can't think of anyone who actually had the backstory of selling cars. I know a stage hypnotist who used to, but I'm sure the story's been there at some point. But let's talk about selling cars. Just to give you a cross example of this. Chunking down. So I understand you'd like to buy a minivan. What are you looking for in a minivan? And to that, I may have answered a couple of years ago, I want seats that lay down flat in the back. I want an entertainment system inside of it, the TV that drops down, maybe a DVD, perhaps Blu-ray player. And it'd be great if it had an HDMI input because we just got a Nintendo Switch and that thing is amazing. Love to see good safety ratings and all these things. I'd love to just a good, comfortable experience. So again, from these questions, I can now start to go into step 2 of feeding back these strategy statements. So tell me more about entertainment features. Well, I've got 2 kids, and on long road trips, it would be great to keep them entertained in the back on these long road trips. And now I'm starting to figure out if I'm the car salesman. Well, I've got this one on the lot. I've got this one on the lot. I've got this one. Now I'm already starting to realize what specific offer I can make. Tell me more about the comfort of driving. Well, at one point we did own the Toyota minivan, and it just felt like a living room on wheels, and it was hard to drive. It just seemed bigger than necessary. Now this person's in their mind realizing, I only know one example because it's the one we have. The Honda Odyssey from 2011 on is a little bit more round of a vehicle and is now a little bit more smaller on the inside, bigger on the inside, but smaller on the outside frame, yet maintaining the crash safety ratings. So you realize what's already happening here to kind of pre-frame where we're going with this. The salesperson here is already realizing here's the offer to make, rather than, hey, look at all these options, which suddenly brings in the analysis paralysis. So perhaps you have various weight loss programs. I mean, I basically have 2 weight loss programs. One is let me modify, 3 really. One is let me modify to fit your specific goals. 2 is here's the virtual gastric band. Here's a system that we can run together. Or option 3 is let's kind of combine the 2, though to be fair, in virtual gastric band, both Sheila and I teach how to modify it for the client in front of you. It's not just a scripted process, though it could be. So here we are inside of the second segment on strategy feedback. Because again, by asking these questions, the answers may start to dip the toes into the internal motivation or even value-based statements, which again is driving the person inside into that unconscious processing to make these breakthroughs, discoveries, and epiphanies on their own and really further motivate themselves. Turn on that propulsion system of motivation, turn on that engine to really get in there and make this change. And this, by the way, becomes a place that thankfully I'd say, giving rough numbers, only about maybe 5% of the people I'd say I'd interact with are not willing to answer these questions. I just want to quit smoking. How much is it? What is it? And they give you very short answers, perhaps. This is where you're starting to screen for that internal motivation, and perhaps they're in the it'd be nice to create this change place versus I really need to create this change. Though the benefit here is that sometimes by asking these questions, you are turning on that motivation engine, and you are getting them out of that it'd be nice to a wow, I really need to do this, which perfectly sets us up for step 3. Step 3 is to chunk up to appeal to their identity and heighten the need to create change. So you've learned chunking down. Chunking down is getting into the specifics. Chunking up is looking for that sort of meta perspective of basically what's that going to give you. So by getting into that question of what's that going to give you. And I'll give you a couple of questions here, which we're going to soften these with some tag questions at the end. So, let's get into the example of the weight loss person here to really set this in motion by way of an example. I'd like to get more active so I can lose weight. I'd like to, and by chunking down, we end up on, I'd like to be going to sleep earlier and waking up earlier so I can exercise at the CrossFit gym before heading into work, because that helps me to feel more mobile and that helps me to feel stronger. And when I'm out in the community around friends or meeting new people or even on a new date, I feel more comfortable in my own skin. Notice that this chunking down already brought about some of the motivation value-based statements so I can feel more comfortable in public. This is where in step 3, we're going to get more specific by going into these questions to find what's really in it for them. So here's some of the questions. Here's some of the phrases that I'll often use. So you'd like to feel more confident. Yeah. What's that going to give you? And maybe they say, meeting new people. And by meeting new people, there's a bit of strategy feedback. What's that going to give you? Well, I've been single for a bunch of years. I got out of a bad marriage a few years back, and I'd like to, meet someone that aligns with me better. Well, what's that going to give you? Again, we're continuing to chunk up. We're looking for that bigger meta perspective answer. Well, what's that going to give you? Well, comfort, passion, the ability that I know I've got someone. And when we hit a point where it seems that's the real reason that they want to produce this change, that's the real driver. There's a little bit of verbal influence here that really is about driving towards a moment of discovery, driving to a place that also fully presents the fact that I understand them. I'm in sync with them, and I'm a person who can help them to create this change. And there's some tag questions at the end of these statements that do help to soften it in case you're wrong. So I'd like to have more comfort in my life. And you let it have a bit of a pause. And you go, and that's why you really called me today, isn't it? I will give you a disclaimer that these tag questions, these statements, these bold leading statements have not yet come back to bite me. Instead, these statements that I'm presenting to you now very often get the response of, well, yeah, here's another one. Well, that's what we're really talking about here, isn't it? That's what we're really talking about here, right? There's another version of the tag statement, the tag question at the end. So we've gone all the way down from, think of this arc, from healthy eating to doing the Whole30 program, because basically it's just eating food. I mean, it's based on a book called It Starts With Food or something of that nature. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. It's a great, great read. But then from there, getting into I have more energy throughout the day. Well, what's that going to give you? Well, when I get home, I just feel like I just want to lounge on the sofa and do nothing. Well, what's that going to give you? Well, I feel guilty with the fact that my kids come home from school just a ball of energy, and, I'm just kind of sitting there and watching them, and I'm not really interacting with them. We got to chunk down again. Well, how would you like that to be different? Well, I'd like to be able to get up and play with them and just get out there and be more active. And, I kind of grew up as a bit of a fat kid myself, and I don't want them having to deal with the challenges I did from that. Well, for you to become more active, what's that going to give you? Well, that's going to help me to become more active so I can be there for them. I'm just curious, just to explore this. What's that going to give them? Well, that's going to let them know that I really love them. And that's what this is really about, isn't it? Well, yeah. And suddenly now we have just heightened the motivation. We have just really ignited the passion to create this change. Rather than weight loss is $1,500, how a lot of people unfortunately run their business. This, by the way, as a side note, this is why my pricing is not on my website. Outside of the stop smoking category, because there's an extended video that just sets the stage for the process, this is why at the time of this recording, my pricing is not on the website. Because to read weight loss is $1,500, well, what does that mean? As instead now, both the client and myself have a full understanding of where we're going to go in the process, what change strategies from my side of things need to be used, and really what's the end of the story. This isn't about stepping on the scale and seeing it 20 pounds down. This is really going to be an adventure of getting them to that place where the kids come home from school, they're grabbing some toys, they're going out to a field, they're going out in the backyard, and we're changing the family dynamic. So again, this is appealing to that identity. This is heightening the need to create the change, which here comes the ethical bold statement. If you're not doing this, how dare you? Because instead, this is where we're really getting into the value of the change. So what have we done so far? Step 1, meta model questions to chunk down into the specifics. Step 2, feeding back these specifics. Just with a question, tell me more about eating healthy. Tell me more about speaking in public. Step 3, chunk up to appeal to the identity and heighten the need to create this change by discovering the internal value motivation systems that are driving this. Well, speaking in public, what's that going to give you? Well, it's going to help me become more visible at work. And what's that going to give you? Well, there's some open positions at my work, and I'd like to take on more responsibility and greater income and just have more authority. Well, what's that going to give you? Well, so far I've just kind of felt stuck and stagnant, like I'm not really living to my full potential. And by speaking in public, the audience will see me, but also I think I'll see myself as that skilled, talented person that I really am. And that's why you called me today, isn't it? Well, yeah. So at this point now, we are fully in rapport. At this point now, we are in sync. At this point, we both have a mutual understanding as to where this process needs to go. And with that, we can now appropriately now move on to step 4. Take note of, again, the 1, 2, 3, 4 sequence of this. I am not ethically allowed to present my service until I fully have an understanding of what it is you'd like to do and why you're doing it, rather than selling something to somebody who it's not yet a fit for, offering some sort of in-a-box service to someone who that's not a fit for. Because now, based on the interaction, which side elements to this inside of neurolinguistic business, we're going to be getting into the power of metaphor, getting into the power of specific other linguistic strategies, whether it's eliminating self-limiting beliefs, whether it's the actual positioning and the tonality of how we eventually make this offer you're about to make, the use of embedded commands, the rethinking of NLP strategies like visual squash and even the swish pattern, how we apply the thinking of these NLP patterns to run our business. Again, all the details for that live class, worksmarthypnosis.com/NLP biz. But at its basic level, step 4, now we just simply feed back what we've received so far in the context of here's the program that I'd offer you. So I'm just going to use it the way that I would normally say this to a client. So based on what we've talked about so far, you'd like to use hypnosis. There's a command, by the way. You'd like to use hypnosis to become more motivated in exercising more frequently and discover that ability that you have to become more accountable to yourself, to get to bed early and wake up in an appropriate time so you can get up and exercise. Right? Yes. Yes, we are building a bit of a yes set here, but you're going to see some other more appropriate, more modern ways to do that, because most ways that people do a yes set is just tacky and just sidebars the process. And in doing that, you'd like to become more effective as a parent, that you'd like to become more caring and more in the moment. So that way, sometimes maybe there's moments where they have to keep up with you rather than you keep up with them, right? Yeah. And that's going to give you that greater ability to actually be there, become a better parent, and really at its core, not just help yourself, but help them not have to deal with the problems you dealt with growing up. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, right? Yes. Okay, so in the weight loss program, this is exactly what I help people do. I help you to create A, B, and C so you can E, F, and G, and I'm just feeding back the stuff that they said. And it's where, again, there's other linguistic strategies that go beyond the shape of this chunking up and chunking down dialogue, but simply getting into what I've found works best is that we work over a brief process of 4 sessions, which for some people, that's all they need. Like you'd work with a personal trainer to learn how to shift your thinking, right? Or some people find value in the fact that I'm here to support you as needed. And if that's the case, we can add on additional sessions, though full disclosure, my goal is to give you the most effective process and the most efficient use of your time. We start with a plan of 4 sessions, typically on a weekly basis. I'm in the office Monday. Notice the shift here. I've let them do all the talking, and that's now given me the right to then present the program. And there's some other questions you could have done in the beginning to go, let me ask you some questions so I have a better understanding. And if I think I can help you, would it be all right if I explained how this all works? After all, you are calling a business, right? Which is said in a tongue-in-cheek way, but at the end of it, you are setting up, yeah, I'm going to sell you something at the end of this, without being snarky, without being misleading about it. They know they're calling a business. Here's the service, here's the price. And this is where you then lay out number of sessions, what the investment is, and again, Sales 101, satisfy objections before they arise, and my closing strategies. Before I say the number, I've already explained, these are my hours, this is when I work, this is what my waiting period usually is to get into the office, this is where I'm located. So at the time that I then finally say the price, I don't mean to give it the old school thinking of whoever talks next loses, but really everything's now on the table. And now, here's the real intention, they are fully qualified to make that choice. In the live training, we're going to talk about some methods to break down common objections, and I've got some different thinking on this through experience of booking thousands of clients over the years, selling hundreds of thousands of dollars of products online. It's not just the game of having a clever thing to say. It's not the old snappy questions, snappy answers to stupid questions out of a Mad magazine. No, it's instead bringing it back to the specifics, bringing it back to the value statements to then reignite that passion, that goal, that driving force as to why this person is calling us in the first place. So I want you to put this all into use. And just to recap it all, here are the steps once again, and these will be printed in the show notes that are over at worksmarthypnosis.com. Step 1, meta model questions to chunk down into the specifics. Again, this gives you the roadmap to their issue and often may create breakthroughs by dissolving generalizations. Step 2 is to do that strategy feedback to look for motivation and values. Think of this as you're dipping the toes in the pool of value-based statements. Tell me more about is your simple language pattern for that. Step 3 is to chunk up to appeal to their identity and heighten the need to create the change. So in here, what's that going to give you? What's that going to give you? What's that going to give you? Pause, pause, pause. And that's why you called me today, isn't it? Or that's what we're really talking about here, right? Or that's what it's really about, isn't it? So again, we're hitting that ultimate value. We fully chunked up to go, what's absolutely in it for you to create this change? So now we're on to step 4. Now is the appropriate time to present your services in a way as the solution, feeding back their individual strategies and ultimate motivation and values as to why we're having this dialogue. So again, please put this to use. This is powerful stuff. This is what has really helped me to book, over the years, more than $1 million of one-to-one client sessions. And even better, as soon as the person's now in front of me, we hit the ground running because now we both have an understanding of where we're going. I've got a better understanding of what techniques to use and recognize you're selling the entire way through the process. And we've now used our hypnotic language patterns to build that motivation, get complete buy-in to the client before they even get the opportunity to purchase the services. And now we've built an even greater motivated client. Here's the bigger picture to all of this. By having this type of dialogue with my potential client, the person I'm selling my services to, this has changed the dynamic of the conversation. It's no longer, oh, I really need this to work. Instead, now as they're arriving at their first appointment, the dialogue is different. Oh, I'm so excited for this. I am ready to create this change. And yes, I've talked about weight loss. Yes, I've talked about public speaking. This works for everything. And there's so many more strategies that I'm excited to share with you. So check out some of the videos and details over at worksmarthypnosis.com/NLP biz. It's a 2-day hands-on course, which is not just lecture. You've listened to me enough if you've made it 192 sessions, 191 episodes into this series. It's about actually getting the hands-on feedback, workshopping this process, getting those little punch-up nuances of try it this way. Okay, rewind that back, and this time try this tag question to soften it. Let's go back to some of the embedded commands, fold in this NLP intervention in the sales process, and again, all this stuff also can convert in some way into print, into video, into podcasting, into audios, into ebooks, into everywhere. Let's help you to NLP up your business. Jason Linett here once again, and as always, thank you so much for interacting with this program, for sharing it on your social media streams, for leaving your reviews online, and once again, join me in sunny, outstanding Las Vegas. HypnoThoughts Live is the ultimate hypnosis convention. It is the biggest one in the industry. It is the most welcoming environment you could possibly find in this community, and on top of that, stick around after the event for neurolinguistic business. It's going to be the Tuesday and Wednesday, August 20th and 21st in 2019 at the HypnoThoughts Live Convention. Plus, when you sign up for my course, you get a discounted rate for the actual HypnoThoughts Live Convention. All the details online, worksmarthypnosis.com/NLP biz. NLP BIZ. I normally say see you on the inside, but instead, see you in Vegas.
Thanks for listening to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast at WorkSmartHypnosis.com.
Hey, it's Jason here, and I want you to be the first to find out as we upload new content here online. So do this right now. Click subscribe right next to this video, and you will be the first to find out as I share further resources, further downloads, and other really cool things to come your way. See you soon.